Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Metropolitan pack from Video Copilot. Now, this pack features 3D buildings, skyscrapers, industrial buildings, offices, and just a bunch of cool buildings to populate your own little city. So today I'm going to take you through the pack, show you what's included, how to use it, and just some general tips and tricks. Now, if you haven't seen the demo video already, let me just show you a few things that were created using this pack. All right, so those are some of the things that you can create. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the tools. So let's create a new composition, and we'll hit OK. And then we're going to create a new solid and hit OK. Then over in the effects and presets, I've already typed in element. That's going to save us a lot of time. And we're just going to drop it onto our layer. So I've already installed the Metropolitan pack. And when you install it, it'll become available to elements. So we're going to launch the scene setup. So here's element. I've adjusted the panels a little bit specifically for this demo. And first thing, we come over to the model browser. And by the way, to get it to be horizontal, you can change this to be a vertical browser divider. So if you want to move it over here, and to move the panels, just drag the names and you can move them around. So I'm going to scroll down here to the Metropolitan pack, and there's 3 subfolders. We have graphic buildings, Metropolitan, and Metropolitan no antennas. So the graphics buildings, these are very basic buildings. These are meant for, like a motion graphics city, one that's not heavily detailed, but, has a cool stylistic look. So those are very cool, but the key to Metropolitan is the Metropolitan building. So let's click on that. And here we can go through and see all of the different buildings that are included. So there's some tall buildings, some apartment buildings, there's some shorter buildings, even some industrial looking buildings, like these flat sort of, warehouse types. And then we have some offices and some skyscrapers. And then we also have the street layouts, and we'll talk about those a little bit more, as well as the street layouts without any building. So you can use those to, tile your own little city area. Now, below the Metropolitan is the Metropolitan no antennas. So just to get this out of the way, it's exactly the same as the Metropolitan. It's just all of the antennas on the buildings and some of the details have been disabled specifically to make the objects load a lot faster. So if you have a really low-end graphics card, you might consider trying these buildings out, because think about like an antenna array. Some of the antennas are so heavily detailed that they're actually more polygons than the actual building itself. So just keep that in mind. And not to mention, it's good, even if you have a great graphics card, to use these ones for further away buildings so that you're not, wasting polygons on, far outside buildings. So that's the only difference. So here's how this works. Every building has a day version and a night version. And the main difference is the night version has illuminated windows, which actually light up. So if we change the lighting setup and maybe turn the brightness down, you can actually see the illumination on these windows. Now, I'm going to go ahead and disable draft textures, just so we can really see some of the detail here. And like I said, these antenna arrays are very high poly. So if we look at the wireframe view, let's see here. Some nice detail for sure. All right. So you can just click on the different buildings. I'm going to just hide the info there and check them out. So we've just put a lot of detail into these. There's rooftop details from air conditioning to pipes, helicopter landing pads, just a lot of fun stuff. So when you're creating those sort of aerial shots, you see a lot of this specific detail. Now, we've added a couple of specific buildings like the Empire State Building, probably just for fun. I'm not sure this one fits very well into a lot of skylines that don't look exactly like New York City, but it's a cool building for sure, and somebody can use it for something. We can only hope. The industrial buildings, these are very cool. These buildings are meant to be sort of on the outskirts of the city. And going through a little bit more, we've got these industrial buildings. These are really cool, sort of these flat, warehouses and such. And you can just go through and try out the different models. You can check them out, zoom into them. You can play around with the lighting. You can even change the environment reflection map. So, for example, a building like this that has a lot of windows, I might actually click on the environment, and instead of using sort of a blurry looking environment map, don't get me wrong, these are great for a lot of things, but for buildings that are so large, you want the detail to be fairly sharp. So we've included some additional maps, some 4K maps that you can use that look a little bit strange, but when you see them reflected, you can actually see some of the building detail. So these are great for just giving more realistic reflections. On any given building, we can take a look at the different materials that are set up. So you've got things like satellite dishes, antennas, lights, and then you have the skyscraper itself here. So if you want to change the skyscraper material, you can go in there and make some adjustments. So maybe you want a darker building, whatever you need. But let's say you want to get rid of an antenna or something. What you can do is shut off some of these materials that make up some of these specific features. So you can see some of these antennas can just be shut off directly, and you can change the building around to fit your specific needs. Like if you wanted to put a title on here and a particular antenna was in the way, we've separated it so that you can go in and turn that off. All right, so now that we've gone through the basic idea of this pack, let's take a look at building a mini city. So the first thing you want to do is go through and pick a few buildings. So we'll just go through, we'll click on a few here. We've got the apartment, maybe this building 3, come down a little bit more, building 4. Let's see. It was like this office building, and office 4 is cool. Skyscraper 3, and maybe one more. How about skyscraper 2? So you really want about 6 or 7 different buildings, and we can collapse all the materials so that we can just see them real quick. And usually, you can make this full screen, so you don't have to work in a really small area. So we've picked all of our buildings, and they're all on group 1. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to create a new camera. We're going to call this SkyCam, because if I were in a helicopter, that's the name it would be. And we're going to pull back here and take a look. So by default, Element has a single particle visible. So what I want to do is go into the particle replicator and change it from a point to a plane. And then I'm going to increase the particle count, say 50. And slowly move up from there. Element 3D was designed to work with this pack. One of the things we did was we looked into ways to actually randomize buildings, but keeping them perpendicular. In other words, rotating them only 90 degrees, but randomly. So we implemented a feature. If we go down to the particle look, rotation. So rotation random is cool, but that's going to be one funky city. I mean, think about how bad the directions will be on Apple Maps. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry. Where were we? Okay, so rotation random doesn't work, but we have another feature called Randomize Angle. So what we can do is we can type in a specific angle and it will randomize that value in those multipliers. So what I want to do is set the Y rotation to 90 degrees. So what that's going to do is rotate the buildings so that some of them are randomly rotated 90 degrees and some of them are not. So if we look at these two buildings, they're the same building, but this one's rotated this way and this one's rotated this way. So what that does is adds just much more randomization to our buildings, because now not even the same building is rotated the same nearby. So we can also play around with some more randomization. So that's kind of the first thing we want to do. Randomize the angle, then do a little bit of random size. We just turn up the size random here, and we can start adding a few more buildings. Fill this place up. Okay, so now we're going to set up some lighting. So I'm going to go ahead, create a new light, and we'll make a parallel light at about 150 and hit OK. And we basically want to create sort of a light coming from above. Yeah. And then we're going to create another light, which is going to be an ambient light. This is sort of our neutral light. Now, depending on the color that we want our scene to look, we want to use that color in the ambient light. So if we want a kind of a daytime warm scene, we want to try to use the color in the light. And we can even get a little bit darker to, yeah. And we can also take the top light here, the parallel light, and give it a little bit of warmth as well. Okay. So this is a pretty good start. Now, Metropolitan comes with a few city backgrounds, skylines, and what we can do is just take a look at those. Basically, just some generic distant buildings with a nice sky. So we can take that, drop it into the bottom of the scene, make it a 3D layer, and hit AA. And what we want to do is turn accept lights off. And that way it'll just stay true to its own color. We'll hit V and push this off into the distance and then turn it up. All right, so there we go. Now we've got this nice bright sky, and so I'm thinking that maybe our parallel light should be a bit brighter, maybe a little less ambient light. You know, once you get that background in place, you can really start seeing, you know, where your lighting should be coming from and how bright it should be. So that's pretty good. All right, so next thing I want to do is go back into the element layer, and we're going to come down here to ambient occlusion. We're going to turn this on, and this is just going to add some shading to our buildings. Now, I like to turn the depth influence down to like 20 when I'm using city buildings, since everything is pretty far away, and then turn up the radius and the darkness a little bit. Cool. Now, the thing about doing cities, one of the most important things is creating fog and fall off that goes off into the distance. So right now, our size is pretty small. We're going to let's increase it a bit and even add more buildings. This place is just getting filled in. So here we go. All right. And we're going to come down here to the render settings, and we're going to close the ambient occlusion, and we're going to open up the fog. So I'm going to turn it on, and then we're going to take the color of sort of this background blue. Let's see. Let's try that again. Yes. And let's turn the range down. So the way this works is you change the start distance, and it's going to change the fog position. Now, I always like to have a little bit of fog, and if we click on the color, we can go ahead and tweak this to try to match our horizon line. So we want to try to match where our fake buildings end and the real buildings of the image begin. So we want to try to see if we can match it, pretty close. All right, so this is looking really good. We could do some cool stuff right now. We could do some titles, whatever. Now, what I like to do is add a second dimension of buildings. And the way to do that is to select the element layer, go back into the scene, and we're going to take all of our buildings and we're going to apply them to group 1 and group 2. So I'm just going to click, 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 and click, click. There we go. Then we're going to hit OK, and we're going to come down to group 1. And one of the cool features is you can copy all of the settings and then paste them into another group. So now we've made it an exact copy, but instead of having the same amount of particles, I want it to be just about 25. Then we're going to go to, let's see, the size, and we're going to turn this up. Yes. So these are like the big, large buildings. Now, some of these buildings, like this office building, maybe it's a little bit too wide to be a tall building. So what we could do is we could go through, if you just use the up and down arrows, and say, you know what, this building doesn't quite make sense. Let's just not have it be in group 2, and then maybe just come back over here to the Metro pack, find a nice tall skyscraper, maybe, this guy, and set that to channel 2, group 2 by itself. Then we hit OK. So that way we're, adding enough, repetition without having, unusual sized buildings. Now, the other thing in the replicator is we can bring the size in, so we don't have to have the buildings be so far away. We can create sort of a downtown look and maybe even lessen the amount of buildings. And to randomize it further, just play around with the random seed. So you could tweak this. Let's just create a new adjustment layer. I like to do that. And we're going to add a curves adjustment. And let's just add some contrast here. And we'll go half res so that it doesn't look so messed up. And maybe our fog should be a little bit lighter. So after you do a little color correction, you can make some adjustments as well. Now, if we wanted to, we could maybe add some glow. We could do a glow over the highlight area, or just like to make it nice and wide and turn it down. Like, you don't want this to be too intense. And remember, we can color correct this background plate. It's a separate layer. We could just, we could bring the highlights down, but keep those sort of bluer buildings. So, feel free to mix it up just to get the look that you want. I'm going to take the text tool here, and we're going to add a title. So we're just going to type Metro. And in the same instance of element, we're going to go down to the custom layers and select the Metro text. And we'll just shut that off and jump back into the scene setup. So I want to try to show you a whole, routine of what you could do. So we're going to open up the extrude, and there it is. Now, it's got a little spike coming off it. That's okay. Spike filter. So if we just crank that up, it's gone. Now, another thing we have is zero real estate. If I go to the bevels, we can actually go down and maybe find a nice bevel. I like to do something pretty simple. This one looks pretty nice. Let's just go back to default lighting. And maybe take this background color and darken it a little bit more. And maybe make this front a little bit lighter. There we go. And depending on how long your text is, you can always play around with this bevel scale to just find the right balance. Now, our buildings are currently on group 1 and group 2. So let's put this on group 3. Now, if you hold down Alt and click it, it'll switch it to that group instead of at the same time. So Alt will swap it. All right, we'll hit OK. Now on group 3, we need to scale up our text and then move it up. There it is. Isn't that funny how like when you have something big like a building that it instantly gives text, you know, this massive scale. You know, it's like it's all relative. Like you could have a title that's fills your screen, but if it doesn't have something relative to it, you know, it'll just look like a big title. But here you actually have some, you know, this cool like mass to it. So let's maybe pull it forward in front of that building right there. Cool. So now with the camera, our sky cam, we could hit PA, keyframes, and then you know, part of the trick here is we could move up to make it visible. We could just put some more color correction on top of this. Maybe, you know, bring some of this green back into it. All right, so this is looking pretty good. We could just make some changes to our text, and you know, we're in business. We're in business. You know, I can move around that that object so that it's closer or further away. I can even change the position of some of these buildings. I mean, this one's like intersecting anyway. I should probably at least scale it up so that it blocks the other building. Yeah. And that's really the beauty of this pack and Element 3D is that we get to see this in practically real time. You know, we can move things around, we can make adjustments to lights and get instant feedback. So we can really refine it and you know, get it to look great. Now there's one more thing I want to show you. We're going to come over here and just start fresh with an element copy on a solid. And we're going to jump into the scene setup. And we're going to come down here to Metropolitan. Now, I'm going to click on the Metropolitan folder. And we're going to scroll down. And we have these city blocks, so these street layouts. Now, be careful. They do load a lot of textures all at once if you do click on them. And make sure you're using Element version 1.5. So I'm going to click on one of these here, Street Layout 6 at night. So what's cool about these is they have buildings, and if you get close enough, let's see here, you can see there's little street lights and crosswalks and stuff like that. So there's some fun details on these. And, you know, we could cheat a night light here by just darkening this down a bit. So pretty cool. So let me hit OK. So I've got the one city block here. Now I want to go ahead and extend it so there's a few more blocks. So what we can do is just like before, we go to the particle replicator, set it to a plane, and we want to set this to a square number. So let's set this to something like 16. So then if we increase the scale, we can actually get these to align perfectly. So you can see that they're lining up here. Now, if you hold down Control, you can refine this so that it goes together perfectly. And these are meant to all tile so that they can be extended. Now, the one problem here is that they look pretty repetitive. So we're going to use that same randomize angle trick. Go to the particle look, rotation, randomize angle 90, and there we go. We've sort of randomized it. If we come down in here again, we have a little bit more latitude as far as where we can go. So we could do things, first of all, we could play around with maybe some of the glow in the windows. We could go down to the render settings for glow and turn that on, and maybe tint the windows, tint the glow more orange. You know, we could play around with the, you know, the light position and things like that to give it a nice sort of moonlight look. So anyways, there's obviously unlimited combinations that you could do. You could mix buildings together. You could add a specific building. So one thing to think about, just like we placed that city text right there, we could place one specific building there. So we could take one building on group 4 and put it right there. So really think about how you can take advantage of the 5 groups and use some as replicators and use others to place specific things. All right, well, be sure to upgrade to Element 3D 1.5. It's got some great features for the building pack, as well as some optimized textures so that it loads really fast. And be sure to check out the pack. It's our biggest pack yet. It's over a gigabyte of stuff, of textures. If you think about each one of these buildings, just to brag a little bit, if you think about any one of these textured buildings, not only do you have the skyscraper, which has a diffuse specular reflection and a bump map, but you've also got the roof elements, the satellite dishes, the LED lights, plus the illumination map. So, we've really spent a lot of time, we can crank those up. We really spent a lot of time trying to make these as realistic as possible so that, you guys can use these. And don't forget, all of the buildings are available in Cinema 4D, 3D Max with V-Ray, FBX, OBJ quads. So all the other 3D formats that you might need for Maya or otherwise, all of those files are available to download as well, and they're all textured, ready to go. Anyways, my name is Andrew Kramer. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.